Hello and welcome back to another episode of Glampatech's Start a Glamping Business podcast. I'm your monthly special guest co-host Connor Schwab with Sage Outdoor Advisory, here with Nick Perslow. And today we're very excited about our guest, Whitney Scott, who you're probably familiar with. She's well known in the glamping space and even more well known in the campground space. She is the former Senior Vice President of Strategy for Kampgrounds of America, which is the largest campground ownership company in the world. I think over 500 properties. And then became the Chief Operating Officer of their new glamping branch called Terramor Outdoors, which started a little over 2 years ago. Whitney's also a friend of mine. We had a chance to collaborate and work on the glamping report that we launched in 2022. Sage was working on a lot of the glamping business data and statistics and trends, and then Terramor and KOA was bringing a lot of the customer feedback, so that was a fun opportunity for us to partner and kind of how we met. And if you're familiar with the industry, you're probably well aware of Whitney. She seems to be a speaker at every major event. She's often on stage at the glamping show, at Skift, other outdoor conferences. So she's pretty well known, and I think that's our intro. So Whitney, you want to just tell us a little bit about what Terramor is, as well as KOA, just to give the audience a little bit of background of contents about the Acadia site, what type of unit types, quality level, price point, and then we'll kind of dive into your personal story and how you ended up in these roles.
Yeah, definitely. Terramor is a glamping brand birthed out of KOA, which Kampgrounds of America, KOA, is an over 60 years old company that started as a franchise company for campgrounds across the nation and Canada. I believe currently it's over 520 some campgrounds, and most people know it. It's the giant yellow sign, and it's a great company from a campground perspective. And in 2020, that company actually produced a glamping company called Terramor, which is very, very much a part of bringing to life. And that glamping resort is right now operating in Acadia right outside of Acadia National Park.
First of all, Connor, you're getting better and better at introducing these podcasts. I'm seriously worried for my job. Whitney, just before we go into Terramor, I just do want to cover KOA briefly. First of all, how did the opportunity come about? Because you had a pretty extensive background before that, but from what I can see, there wasn't much outdoor hospitality background. So I'd be interested in knowing how the opportunity came about.
Yeah, so you're spot on. Not from a hospitality background, definitely from a marketing background. I actually started out in the diamond industry in New York. I have a trade degree certificate from the Gemological Institute of America, and kind of really sharpened my teeth on diamonds from a marketing perspective. And then I actually worked with a startup in Montana, a government contractor in big data analytics. And it was working on security sensor data. And what was great about that is not only did I continue to grow as a marketer, but I really started understanding data and how to work with it, how to bring it into a marketing perspective. And after that, I knew I didn't want to leave Montana. And KOA had listed a job, and I've been with KOA for 11 years. So I think it was a communications job, a head of communications. And I went to interview in Billings. I, at the time, lived on the other side of the state, and met with Toby and another executive, as well as our president and CEO at the time, Pat Himmeyer. And it was, I just fell in love with the company. I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I really wanted to get out of government work. And Toby was just like an awesome leader. I wanted to work with her. The job wasn't necessarily what I'd been doing from a marketing perspective. I was already leading teams, but it was a great opportunity to get in the door, and I hadn't worked for a legacy brand, if you would. I was building brands a lot, but this was an opportunity to come into a well-known brand, really understand how that brand functions, and then build something new like Terramor, which was a huge opportunity. So that's kind of the background of how I got there.
Yeah, one question I have, and this is a selfish question, is, people listening to this by now will definitely know what Posh Outdoors is, the project I'm working on, and I promise this isn't a plug or anything. But we're going to be faced with a situation where we have a kind of a soft brand, a parent brand, and we're going to have individual sites kind of under our wing that we're going to be doing marketing for as well. And we're going to have to kind of figure out how we do the kind of wider brand marketing, but also allow or work on the individual marketing for the individual sites across the US and Canada. So I'm interested in how KOA and how you did this at KOA is how you kind of straddled that boundary and how you kind of made the most of the kind of the benefits of having that overarching company and that big brand, but also make sure that you were doing all your local marketing as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting subject that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. Is there's a big difference between brand marketing and then what I call like local marketing, which is just very campground location specific marketing. So brand marketing, you're going to be like highly leaning into the awareness of that brand if it already exists, or building the awareness of that brand and communicating the consistency of what that brand really means. From a KOA perspective, what are those key differentiators that you can count on at every single location? And the wonderful thing about a brand is that by leaning into it, that collective aura and that collective ability is your stronghold. So from a Posh Outdoors perspective, as you're growing, you really have to first do well at that location, really focus on that tactical element. Who is the competition at a ground level? How do you get a guest to come in through that door? How is that customer experience, so that you can really start building what that brand means? And then as more and more locations open, is there brand continuity that people can expect? And what's great is that KOA, there's a belief statement in KOA. You mentioned once is like, what's one of the fun things that I've done at KOA is really we built the belief statements. And one of the belief statements we built is that each campground is unique, but collectively we work better together. So collectively we have to have something that keeps us together, keeps our customers aware of what we are, or they are. My pronouns are all off since I've left, so I apologize. But you can still celebrate the uniqueness. So it's really being very detailed in what does the brand mean? What is the value of that brand? Building that value of a brand, and then celebrating the uniqueness when you're doing very tactical local marketing efforts. Because when you're looking at that campground, glampground specifically, that marketing mix is going to be very different to the overall brand sometimes, and it just needs to complement it. It doesn't need to work against it. It needs to facilitate whatever is going on in the brand marketing, but then really be very tactical about who that campground is at a local level and how in that environment does it play with the other hotels or glampgrounds or campgrounds.
Awesome. Could you tell us a little bit more about how Terramor came to be? What was your role in it, and then how did KOA decide to, venture into the glamping space?
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation that has been a fun one with Terramor as we launched. Terramor was actually KOA was trying to figure out what to do with this glamping fad. like we already had deluxe cabins, but could we really say at the time, which is around like 2013, 2014, 2015, when glamping really started becoming something we were hearing in the camping industry, we were trying to say, could we utilize this fad? Could we market ourselves? And being KOA and who they are as a company, we did a lot of research. And what we found in that research, which is part of the story of Terramor, is yes, KOA is glamping, and we had glamping, and we could market that, and we do market that. But what we also found is that there is a guest that would never go to a campground, but would go to a glamp ground and wanted to. There's just like preferences in anything. Some people were like, well, I'm not a camper, but I'm sure you hear it a lot in the glamping industry now. I'm not a camper, but I'm a glamper. We would miss that guest potentially, and that guest funnel to maybe eventually get into a campground if we didn't build something specifically for them. And so we decided to build a glamping brand, and we were seeing these under canvas collective retreats pop up, and we were saying, we could do that. And we've been, KOA's been building campgrounds and doing a great job for years. We know how to build outdoors. Why not try this? And Terramor was our test project.
Hello. If you're a regular listener, you'll know all about Posh Outdoors by now. If you don't, my first question is, where on earth have you been? But for those who don't know, it's our brand new glamping startup that is rolling out luxury glamping developments all across the US and Canada, starting in the beautiful Rocky Mountains. And the best thing is, you can now invest in Posh Outdoors and have a piece of the pie. Full details are in the description, but here's Ben Wolf, board member at Posh Outdoors, explaining why he's bullish about the opportunity. And for context, Ben sold his 11-unit luxury glamping operation in Fredericksburg, Texas, at a valuation of $7 million after just 14 months of operations. And yes, that's just 11 units at $7 million. It's safe to say he knows a thing or two about luxury glamping, and that's why it's so good that he's on the board at Posh Outdoors. If you want to learn more about investing in Posh, then check out the link in the description or email nick@glampitech.com. But without further ado, here's Ben explaining why he's bullish about Posh Outdoors.
I joined the team at Posh because, I believe in the team. I wouldn't join a team if I didn't believe in the founders, who obviously have had successful exits themselves. Yourself with your audience in the glamping space and the experience that you bring. Obviously Ed Hayes as well with how much experience he has on the distribution side and, the units themselves and how much know-how he has there. The other side of it is, I think that the revenue share model is pretty interesting and unique. And I think it solves a big need. I think one of the biggest needs in the glamping space is capital and sort of the ability to get these units up and running. And so if you can partner with people that have amazing pieces of property and raise that capital and deliver those units, then I think there's, obviously, like I said, more than enough demand.
I know Connor has a lot of questions on the specifics of, the location and how you built out. The one question I want to ask just before that is, you had basically a marketer's dream of you're in a position where you're allowed to create a brand new brand and company from scratch, basically. What was your process for, I don't know whether you had the land at that point or not, where you're like, okay, we've got to create a brand new brand that obviously is aligned with KOA, but it is a separate brand, Terramor. How did you start that process? What did it look like? And how did you, what were the kind of principles that you ended up going with for Terramor?
Yeah. Branding is sometimes an underthought activity, and looking at KOA, you can tell branding is very important to us, and we understand the value of a brand. And what people sometimes think when they're doing a branding project is, I've got to create a logo. Well, a logo is not a brand. Does not a brand make, I should say. A brand is the look, feel, and experience, and that collective experience and thoughts that a customer is going to have when they think about that logo or they see that logo. And so it is an expression of the finishings. It's an expression of the voice. It's an expression of the materials that you're going to put out there. And so we did a very thorough process that took over a year. And we spent a lot of money with agencies, making sure that it was right. You know, we even came out with a logo that we were like, I don't think so, but maybe. And like eventually we changed the T because the T just was not right. But it's an expression. You really have to know what are your key differentiators. So I think that's something that, you know, when we look at people building glampgrounds, they're like, oh, it's a fad. I'll just pop up some tents. I'll do what this other guy did. And it's like, well, when you copycat something specifically, then you are not differentiating yourself. You're not building a moat around yourself. And it's really important that you understand what is your moat. When you have your elevator pitch to a customer, whether that's online or literally in an elevator, what makes you different than the next glamping resort? And so we spent a lot of time researching the market, understanding what those differentiators were going to be, and then working with agencies to really pull that brand through every single thing from, you know, the brand position to what the staff is wearing to how the food is presented and what kind of food presentation experience are we going to have to, you know, do we eat in the tents? Do we have a microwave? It's the brand speaks through every level of the Terramor operation. And that's truly, and you can feel it. You can feel that Terramor is more than just a logo, is more than just a glamping place. If you haven't been there, you should go. It's amazing.
What were the aspects that you wanted to shine through with the Terramor brands? And then also, did you have a target customer or like an avatar in mind of a customer that you were really trying to serve with this experience?
Persona development is really important from a marketing perspective. Once you have, you know, when you design a brand and you're going out there, you should really understand your target market, and that brand should work well for that target market. That persona of who you're going after. When I was talking about, we were trying to figure out, can we market KOA as glamping? Terramor is really focusing on a boutique hotel guest, someone who would never consider going camping, who doesn't do that, maybe doesn't even really go outdoors very often, but would be willing to have an elevated experience outdoors. And so it was completely separate marketing from who KOA goes after versus who Terramor goes after, which is why if you go to Acadia, you have a KOA camp, their KOA campground, literally less than a mile away, and they're both packed to the brim, and they don't really compete with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's nice that you're not like cannibalizing your own market. And I heard someone say about branding one time, the easiest way to describe branding is it's like a customer who purchases your product or come and stays at your property. What does that say about them as a customer? And I always thought that was an interesting way to describe it. And I guess if you had to summarize, if someone's a Terramor customer, like what does that say about them?
Yeah, I think that one, they're maybe they're adventurous in a sense that's unique to them. So it's a adventurous, not necessarily in I'm going to climb a mountain, but I'm willing to do something maybe I haven't done before, which is that kind of a different mindset when you think of adventure. I think that that persona is as well that they like experiential items. They might be heavy into social media, and they want to be somewhat different. They want to stand out. They want to do something different, whether they need to show it on social media or not, that there is some part of unique experience that they want. And they also are looking for things that are not cookie cutter. So Terramor has a lot of experiences that you just can't find a lot of places. And those really help that guests make that, oh yeah, I'm going to go there. Kind of that you're going to look at a lot of places before you decide to go to that one glamping resort. And what's going to push you over that edge to book, I think it has a lot to do with those experiential sets that Terramor provides.
Mm-hmm. Love it. And were you focused on we want to cater to families, or we want to cater to couples, or Gen Z, millennials, or young professionals. Like, was that in mind when you guys were designing the site?
Yeah, I mean, with that research, I'll always go back. Everyone should do market research. If you can do it yourself, great. There's a lot of market research reports out there. I'm sure there's some people on this call that could do research for you, or have research for you, Connor.
All three of us.
But it's really important so that you can understand that if you have a location, who's already going there that you can tap into. But even from a macro perspective, utilizing things like the North American Camper Report, you can really start to dive into, okay, 78%. This came out of the 2022 Glamping report that we worked on together, is that 78% of glampers were millennials, and like over 60% had families. So Terramor knew that kind of going in. And so we had a good mix of 2% tents, and we had a good mix of 4% tents that can actually sleep 5.
Got it. Okay. And then let's get into your guys' first Acadia location. How did you end up settling on Acadia for your guys' launching locations? What are the pros and cons? I know we kind of had a chat about this, Whitney, a few months ago. Was just Acadia's. It's like Yellowstone, iconic, great name brand recognition, beautiful, super tough seasonality. I think probably 80% of the visitation that goes to probably both Yellowstone and Terramor occurs between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So it's a super compressed season, which has its challenges. So yeah, just wanted to give you the floor and dive into, that location.
Yeah. It wouldn't, if someone were to come up to me and say like, hey, I'm thinking about building a glamping brand, and I think Acadia would be my first one, I'd probably say no. It's a really short season. So very short, similar to like if you were going to build in Glacier. It's a very short season. So cash flowing opportunities, you only have a really short window for cash flow, and your building seasons are really short. And you're usually, if you need to do a project after you open, you're building while your guests are there. So it's just not a great place to start. However, we already had the campground. So it was really just utilizing the opportunities at hand. And interestingly about that campground was, and this is in a lot of the early conversations that we had with media, is that that campground, we couldn't build any more on it. Acadia has a lot, and rightfully so, has a lot of restrictions on building. And so for us to bring in a lot of concrete or build it out into a bigger campground was just not going to happen with the municipality there. And so Terramor actually enabled us to take sites out of the landscape. And that was really exciting to the community because we were actually putting nature back in to the location. And so I think that there's a learning there for a lot of people, hint, is that, when you're coming up against development that maybe people, are a little hesitant to allow like 100 site build out, there's opportunity if you have locations that you could potentially take things out of.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really how we got there. Yeah.
So essentially the county was like, hey, we're not going to let you clear any more land to build more sites, but we will let you add structures to the sites that are already there. And I forget, were you running power and water and electricity to all of the tents? Did they have bathrooms? They did, right?
There's some original ones there that don't have bathrooms inside, but have really elevated bathrooms just right next to them. And they're personal, so they have a key. So your tent has your own bathroom just offsite. Your
units, if you had the exact same unit, basically from a size perspective, one had a private bathroom and one you had a private bathroom, but it was external and you had to leave your tent to get to it. What do you think is the rate difference you would earn for those two options?
Everything else the same, probably like 20% at least. People want a bathroom in their room, for sure. I would I think people really like the units at Terramor that have their own separate bathroom because the units themselves are different and they have like a dining area that the other tents do not. So there's some differences there that cause maybe some interesting pricing. But yeah, people really like their bathrooms in the tent. Really go for that, guys.
Yeah, right. And so maybe let's dive into like amenities. One of the most interesting parts about Terramor is it's one of the very few glamping resorts in the country that offers a pool, as well as full F&B. I think are probably the two most notable. I mean, I know you guys have a lot more, but those are the two most notable. I guess could you walk us through your choices with those two and how the guests received them, how it was operationally and from a development perspective, and then what other amenities you offered on site?
Well, from a development perspective, we already had a pool at that property, though we moved the pool, so technically it's just like building from scratch. But it goes back to what we were talking about, differentiators. That was important to us, and that it targets a different guest. So I really go back to that brand discussion and brand communication is like your brand means something, your differentiators mean something, and that leads you to some sort of target market and persona development. For Terramor, that all goes together. You know, that pool means something and is put into place for a specific reason. Often families are more attuned to find resorts or vacation spots that have pools. They want their kids to be able to swim at maybe after a hike through the park or to have an extra day by the pool. So that was another thing is like certain types of amenities might get you an extra day because people will be like, I want to go into the park, but then I want to have a pool day. So even though when you're building a performa for something like a glamping, a glampground or a campground, you know, yes, there are a significant upfront costs that come with something with like a pool, and there's going to be maintenance costs and there's going to be overhead that needs to take care of it. But each of those amenities, when done correctly, has a significant advantage, and you just need to be very intentional about it.
Has the pool been a hit?
I would say yes. You know, I think that there's a lot of reviews for Terramor that say, you know, we love the pool. The kids love the pool. Or in that we've seen like, oh, we want an extra day or they've seen an extra day for the pool. So I think anything that you put in, just as long, if it kind of correlates to the brand, correlates to who you're developing this resort for, it's going to have a good impact on the overall health of the resort or location.
Is it a kids pool? I assume it's not an adults only pool, or like, is there adult swim or anything like that? Or is it just pools for everybody?
Pools for everybody.
Cool.
You get a pool. Oprah pools. No, I think pool development, especially now as a mom, is really important. It goes back to that branding item, is there, like, as you're building a campground and you have a target market, I'm just going to go non-Terramor for a second, but like if I'm building a snowbird park, I don't need necessarily a splash pad, but having like a swim out bar and maybe like those cool chairs that are like half in the pool is really smart. But I don't think a lot of people build their pools to their market. At Terramor, we did.
Awesome. Was there a diving board?
There's not. That's a liability issue that a lot of people
I was going to
don't
say
want to
it
take.
tends to bump up the insurance quote. I learned. And then, what was the other amenities on site?
Terramor has lots of amenities and experiences. A lot of self-play games, you know, whether it's bocce or cornhole or things like that. I think some of the really cool things are the experiences, and those come from really at Terramor we have like we built into the brand the 4 cornerstones of the brand, and one of them is rooted here. And so we really, the team was amazing at really digging into the community. And Jenny McCullough, still with
Jenny.
Terramor. Yeah, she's done an amazing job, like making sure not only is she's really a part of Acadia, but that team is. And so whether it's oyster tasting and bubbly that a local purveyor brings in, or
that's for the kids, right? The kids love oysters and bubbly.
Of course. It's soda water, right? I'm sure they eat lots of oysters.
Yeah.
I've never seen a kid eat an oyster. But, or
it's like on the kids' menu. The oysters is on the kids' menu.
But yeah, they getting to know like the dark sky community and letting them use our field to have stargazing. Well, our guests get to be a part of that. So there's just this really unique relationship that's been built, and the local area really it brings in Terramor into their experiential set, and we bring them into ours.
Ooh, quick upsell. So Nick, 1 sec, then you go. Free advice for anyone listening. Have a telescope upsell that guests can like book for 2 hours or for an evening for like $30. So boom, free money. You're welcome. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just on the website. Connor and I recently had a nice little spa date at the Nordic Spa near Posh Outdoors, his first location, and I'm
Looks
looking
amazing.
now at the Acadia saltwater immersion at Terramor, and maybe that can be our second little date, Connor.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know you guys had a spa at Terramor. You do?
Yeah, they built a wellness tent, and you can get massage services there. And it was just one of those things, again, that it's like understanding who that person is, how they're going to come into your resort, what can you provide them that's going to give them that elevated feel that we really wanted them to understand. I mean, we're very intentional when we say it's an outdoor resort. We really want you to feel like you're in an outdoor resort.
Hi friends, this is your host, Connor Schwab at Sage Outdoor Advisory. If you're launching an outdoor hospitality project like glamping, then we can help. At Sage, we offer feasibility studies and appraisals. Essentially what that means is we look at the market and your proposed business offering and do an in-depth analysis and financial projections to make sure that your business is profitable. This is something that's very helpful to know before you spend all of your time and resources launching. This is also particularly helpful if you're going to be raising money from a bank or private investors to capitalize your project. They're going to want to see this type of in-depth analysis from an independent third-party specialist. We've done over 250 projects across the US in the last 4 years, so we know what it takes to take a project from concept to reality. If this sounds like something that would be helpful to you, you can go to our website, sageoutdooradvisory.com, and you can schedule a complimentary intro call with one of our specialists. Thanks.
One thing we discuss quite a bit is the spectrum of models you can have to run a glamping site. You know, on the one end you have the very few staff on site, very kind of tech centric on the back end, and kind of you arrive and you'll be left alone and you won't see any staff throughout the whole stay. You know, the getaway model, an hour at Ben Wolf. And on the other end you've got Irene Woods from the fields who loves being out and about, meeting the guests. They have lots of staff on site meeting the guests. It sounds like you've got lots of guided experiences. You've got F&B. Presumably, you're a pretty, or I keep saying you as well, but Terramor is a pretty staff-heavy operation, kind of high-touch hospitality. Is that correct?
I think that yes, and then we've learned a lot. KOA's been operating campgrounds for so long. They're great at operating campgrounds at different levels. Even within the KOA model of campgrounds, you have Journey Holiday and Resorts, which come with the different, as we talk about brands, they come with certain standards of things that you're going to get. And so it's really, they have understood operationally that with every different amenity set that you put into that, kind of how many people you're going to need to run it. But what 500 campgrounds has shown KOA is also that with those types of amenities with that overhead, your guest experience can often increase, as well as your length of stay, as well as your, not cost per available site, but how much added revenue you can have per site. And that's really important, is that as you're building those performas, and if you're intentional, you understand that in putting these pools in, or maybe F&B, maybe you're not going to you can't see the revenue coming off of it. Maybe, hopefully off of F&B, we could talk about that. But like, you can't see your revenue coming off of a pool, but are you getting that extra day or extra 2 days because you're having a pool? Or maybe that guest experience is a little bit better. You're getting better ratings. So it's just understanding that set. And definitely for Terramor, it is a little bit higher touch point. They have an F&B, which adds people. Housekeeping adds people. We built in all sorts of kind of people throughout even like our maintenance, our head of maintenance runs a beekeeping experience for our guests. So
that's awesome.
He's amazing. But it's also, when you give people a lot of autonomy and ability to take ownership in a resort, it's amazing what they can do.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated as well. You mentioned the decision-making process where you're like, okay, we'll put a pool in, and there's no tangible way to measure the impact that will have. What was the makeup of the team that were making those decisions, and how did you talk through that? And what was the decision-making process for figuring out, okay, what amenities do we do? Does this have a direct ROI, or is it an indirect ROI? And how do you kind of figure all that stuff out?
Again, from like 60 years of doing it, some of it, they just have the data in the background to kind of know that this is what's going to happen if you have a pool versus not. It was a pretty small team, actually, for Terramor, because if you think about it, KOA is a big organization that was trying to do big things in the camping side. And so to build this kind of test beta thing, it was kind of like, we just need to do this in a small team, and it can't affect what's going on over here. So it was a really small team of about 4 or 5 people until it really we started to need to hire a marketer or a GM or something like that. But for the first 2 years, maybe it was probably 5 at max.
I could maybe walk you through how we would approach that decision at Sage, and try to use some numbers for it. Whitney, what's like a typical price point for you guys for Terramor? Like, I guess ADR for your average unit.
I haven't been there for 3 months, and even in the last year, I wasn't working specifically on Terramor. So from like a operations perspective, so I wouldn't want to give the wrong number, but we were definitely around the 400 price point.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that makes sense. And then, I don't know, typically we'd probably project a pool between $500,000 and $1 million. Let's just say like 5. And then how many units are on site total?
64.
64. So if there's 64, the way that we would do that math at Sage, and we do it in the RV resort space or the campground space, we might say, hey, we think that you can get $5 more in ADR per night, or $10 more for a resort that has a pool. We think a mom is willing to pay $5 more a night so her kids can play in a pool, which seems realistic. So for a glamping resort, we might say instead of $10, let's say $30 more per night, or $20 could be conservative. So $20 per night, and let's say, well, Terramor is probably a shorter season, so maybe 100 bookings per year times 100 bookings per year times the 60 units. So that would be $120,000 extra dollars per year, that you would get in pool. So it's like, okay, how long does it take for that to pay off? And then you're making cash on top.
That's why we have Connor on the show.
And
yeah,
Whitney,
exactly. Our little mathematician.
Yeah.
I love it.
We got to come up with something.
And he definitely used a calculator. He didn't do that.
I did. And although I need to double check my math. Whitney, I guess if you were going to be going to make a second Terramor site, or if you were going to be making a second Whitney site, those might be two different answers. Knowing what you know now, let's say you're on a budget and you could only do so many amenities, I guess. If there was 2 amenities from that you were going to cut and maybe like 2 or 3 amenities that you were definitely going to keep in the plan, what would those be?
That's a great question. Yeah, I love Terramor and KOAs. I will always bleed yellow. So, I think that they've done amazing things, and I'm super proud of all those teams, and what they've done. I think if I was going to build my own brand, I would be very bullheaded on F&B. I really think that for long term, if we are really going to be elevated camping, I think that guest, and I think we talked about it in the 2022 report, is that guest really has an expectation of food service, especially if you're going to use resort in your name. I think that there's an expectation that there's some side of food. And I also think that I could do a whole thing on food, which I might in a bit of what. And then from so F&B would be something I would definitely look into, depending on where it was and what kind of brand I'm building. It might be counter service, or it could be, food trucks or something like that, but or maybe it's full blown restaurant with catering opportunities. And then from another amenity set, I would definitely do, I think grill spots were really smart. So I think how Terramor did that was really a great initiative. I think spa services is hard, or maybe re-looking at how that's done.
What was hard about it?
Well, you've got to staff it. And so there's the whole gambit of, is it at least, is this an employee? Is this a contractor? If it's a contractor, how do we make sure that the hours we can sell, if we're just contracting in, do we block them up, pay them for a block of hours and hope we can sell those hours? So there's just it's hard. As well as, in a development perspective, adding structures is really expensive. And so how you build a spa or a spa service structure can be very capital heavy. And I think I just relook at how that's done or potentially cut it.
I was going to ask about the spa. I was going to say, you tell me if I'm crazy. I've never run a spa glamping business, so this might be a total oversimplification, but we do a lot of spa projections, and usually what I recommend or tell people is hey, if you can build and provide a tent or a place for the massages to happen that's high quality with a table and all the things, most of the things, you handle linens and stuff on site. And then basically you allow your guests to book a massage 24 hours. It has to be 24 hours in advance. And then you are consulting or contracting with someone who basically puts their availability in the calendar for how, certain hours. And then as long as guests are booking that 24 hours in advance, essentially it just goes straight into that massage therapist's calendar. And then whatever, if you're charging $120 for an hour long open air, massage, then maybe the consultant takes $90 and Terramor takes $30 or something like that. And I was just wondering if you think that would work.
That's definitely a model that goes, the risks in there is just, how good is that consultant keeping their hours updated, and you vice versa, keeping them on point with reservations. We did it a couple different ways. We were lucky enough to find a whole group of massage therapists that did consult or contracting. And so if one of them couldn't make it, we could maybe grab another one. I think spa management is a really hard thing to make a lot of money on. And it's more that it's kind of like offering breakfast for free. you're building it in to elevate your experience to potentially get a different price point. Even just knowing that there's a spa available, even if I don't use it, there's value in that. In the mentality of how I'm choosing a resort. So I would kind of almost put the spa as part of my like marketing costs, is like, I need to use that to reach that elevated experience, because it's really small margins when you're, contracting, and there's a lot of headache in trying to manage that back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Whitney, you and I had a conversation maybe a year ago, and you said, hey, can you shoot me the top 20 highest ADR glamping businesses in the country? And then we kind of looked at like what those have in common. And, I've looked at so many glamping businesses and looked at the data and what amenities they do and do not have. And the way that I think about it, and this isn't debt set, but this is kind of a general bands of where I look at ADR with different amenities and how that can change. Obviously, location and lots of things factor into this, but usually if there's a glamping unit that has like no amenities and doesn't have a bathroom in it, I'm thinking it's probably going to be in the $100 to $200 ADR. If it's a unit that does have a bathroom, it's probably in the $150 to $250. If it has a private bathroom and there's some level of like F&B, like they can get a hot meal, then maybe it's in the $300 to $400 if it has the private bathroom in the unit. And then if it's like a luxury dining experience with, really gourmet meals, wine, cocktails, maybe servers, like a sit-down restaurant, then you're getting into like the $400 to $600. And then the like highest level of luxury being a spa, and whether that's like a sauna, jacuzzis, massages, then you're getting into like kind of the highest band in that, $500 to $700, assuming it's a really high quality property. And that was kind of how we broke it down, I guess. Do you agree with that based off your experience?
Yeah, I mean, we generally 100%. And we were looking at it specifically as like, I think it's really interesting. We were looking specifically at kind of like those upper echelons of resorts. Like, what is the difference between Terramor and Paws Up? And I think one of the biggest conclusions that comes with that analysis, and for us and me going forward, is kind of if you start thinking that you can ask 800 and above, you're pretty much saying that kind of everything on that resort is part of the experience. And it's almost inclusive, maybe not like wine, but everything else is pretty much inclusive of that experience, because we were really like, Terramor, again, everyone should go there. It's amazing. But like Terramor's bathroom is super high end. I mean, it has a steam shower and a glamping tent. It had fret linens from Italy, and just really, really wonderful things and we were like, there's way higher priced glamping resorts out there. What is that difference between us and them when we're offering this? A lot of it came back down to inclusive experiences and food and things that we were potentially charging for. And so I think that was really important. As you go ahead and go back down to your point, I think when you take away the pool, when you take away the lodge, which to Terramor, those are core to the brand, that brings that price way down. And to your point, in that like $250 range, which wouldn't make sense for us to have ever built it.
Just quickly before we finish off on Terramor, because we mentioned F&B a few times, what was the actual F&B offering at Terramor, bearing in mind it's a 64 unit site?
Yeah, so at Terramor, the F&B, it has a restaurant. It is counter order, so you take the little number back, which was intentional, kind of not only on the overhead, but on the flow of the resort and the feel of the resort. The breakfast is completely complimentary. We thought that was a very important piece of it. It is not open for lunch, the counter restaurant. But there is a store that has you can make packed lunch, which was really important because most of our guests are going out into the park. So they weren't going to be at the resort for us to have a restaurant open. So it was a very intentional and smart decision that if we know most of our guests are not going to be there during lunch service, we providing lunch in the morning that they can take with them brought in extra revenue and saved us on staff in the midday. And then, of course, the counter service at night, full bar, beautiful bar. We had grill spots where you can actually purchase the grill kit as well. And then every once in a while, something like an oyster tasting or something like that.
Well, I love it. Thank you so much, Whitney. Probably one of the more iconic leaders in the outdoor space, from both, KOA being the largest camping brand in the world, as well as Terramor being a highly successful brand in the outdoor space. So thank you so much for coming on the show and chatting with us. I look forward to us getting up to more projects together. Just thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you all for having me.